This is TWiT.
For the show.
Leo, I got a segue. Intel, give us some cash.
Cash. Intel, would you like some more cash? They're seeking an investment from Apple. So they got the government to buy in, which may be a little bit socialistic. I don't know. That sounds like socialism, isn't it?
Investment opportunity inside.
I think Intel is willing to take money from anybody. Right.
This basically Apple's like, I remember when we had to have like one of the people we were following up with invest heavily in us in order to survive. Maybe we have improved since then.
Here's the difference.
Now we're the Microsoft.
At the time, Apple was very dependent on Microsoft Office, right?
Yeah.
So
sure,
that made sense, right? Also, Apple, was involved with Microsoft, and Microsoft, of course, needed Apple to avoid the monopoly. In this case, is Apple also, in any way involved with Intel? I don't believe so.
There were also strong rumors that parts of Windows were lifted directly from Mac, from the Apple operating system, and Steve knew where the bodies were.
Yeah,
so there was a. Didn't
Apple sue over the trash can at one point?
No, this was much deeper than that, and this was from relatively good sources. Steve told Bill Gates that we can get into a lawsuit and we'll eventually win, but my company may not exist when we win. so we can sort this out without doing that.
Stock market loved this idea. Shares of Intel gained almost 8%. That actually, and then 6.4% the day before when Bloomberg tipped it. So the government bought 5%. Nvidia bought 5%.
I think now Nvidia is definitely protecting antitrust. So buying into this made total sense for Nvidia to put money in to just keep the lights on over there.
I have to point out that Nvidia has been the master of the shell game investment. Where, for instance, they promised $30 billion to Oracle to buy but then Oracle was going to buy Nvidia chips with $30 billion, and it really is it's a zero net gain, but it looks good on the balance sheets. Well, and I wonder if this is similar. If Nvidia said, okay, we'll give you money as long as you buy our chips or something like that.
I don't know what Intel would do. I mean, I really think this is about protecting themselves from getting into an antitrust situation. And I think that the Nvidia thing where they're not making it, I mean, they're putting money in and then the money's coming back. But what it does do is it means they stay in the middle of all this technology.
It's all Nvidia, all the way down.
It doesn't matter whether it's a shell game or not. It still keeps everybody else out and them in. So I think it makes a lot of sense business-wise.
Should Apple buy into Intel?
Well, the only real the two arguments are, one, it might make the government happy, and two, insurance, right? Like I think the only way that really makes sense here is, sure, maybe in the long term you've got a competitor that could they maybe catch up to TSMC in 5 or 10 or 15 years, maybe. But I think the insurance against something very bad happening in Taiwan is part of what's going. What you'd want here is, and this is why they're trying to get TSMC to build more factories in the U.S. and they want Intel to not fall apart, because if TSMC ends up being the only company in the world that can make advanced processors, that's really bad if you're the United States, if China takes over Taiwan or bombs Taiwan to the point where it can't make chips anymore.
Yeah, and I think the better, I mean, if you're going to use that money, it feels like the better thing to do would be get a bigger plant in Phoenix. That's the getting TSMC, to, somewhere in the United States. It seems like if you're going to spend $100 billion or whatever.
I mean, they are doing that, right? I think this is putting another chip down on a different part of the, whatever this metaphor is, roulette wheel. I know.
I guess I feel like Intel is such a lost boat. Like, you're just throwing money into something. Like, I feel like they're just like, here. I mean, I feel like Nvidia is just patching it up to keep the boat above water, but there's not really. I don't know how Intel turns this around without almost a complete management change.
Well, and the problem,
literally, almost every C-level needs to go and put somebody else in. Microsoft didn't quite do that, but
But it does remind me of Microsoft. It's the whole like Windows, and then at some point, Ballmer exits and they come in and they go, oh, it's actually cloud, and they made the change. And Intel, people have been saying to Intel that, being more like TSMC and fabbing other people's chips is the future, and yet culturally it seems like they just don't want to do it. And there was talk of splitting them, and then they decided not to do that.
Well, it's not even that they don't want to; they don't know how. Like like it's
culture.
It's a culture. It's also just understanding how to deal with everybody's requests. Like you're used to a pipeline and things make sense, and it's much more chaotic.
When I say it's cultural, I also, for people who have not been in sort of larger corporations, I'm not tossing it off as the culture is not a t-shirt people wear. Culture is every single thing that motivates every single employee is pointed in a different direction. I won't say the wrong direction, because sometimes that they're all rowing in the right direction and it's brilliant, but you get everybody rowing in the right direction. That's amazing. There's so much power in that. And then you need to change direction. And if you're rowing against the culture, I did this. I worked for a place that primarily did magazines, right? And I spent 15 years trying to get them to be on the internet. And everybody would nod in the meetings, right? And then they would go back and continue to do what they always did, because that was a corporate culture issue. And so, I understand what Intel's going through here. And so I agree with you, Alex. I think that's the real problem here is Intel. It's not even like they don't even if they know, knowing's not enough. Knowing what you have to do is not enough. You have to change so many fundamental things about it's not just like a new initiative. It's like we need to redefine what is a win and what is a loss, and what is good behavior and what is bad behavior in ways that are counter to decades of culture. Right. It's a tough ask, but at the same time, I'm not sure, especially the US government wants to live in a world where the only company that can make those advanced chips is TSMC, and getting TSMC to be much more involved in the United States helps, but I'm not sure it makes them completely satisfied.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I'm not a big fan of the steadying hand of the market. But the thing is, when a company is in this much trouble, you don't solve the problem by, hey, we've got an influx of cash. We can probably keep going for a period of time until we find the next influx of cash. At this point, you kind of need a regime change to basically someone who comes in either from within, from the old guard, or completely from the outside to say, here is all the stuff that we passed on that we should now be jumping into, or here's an opportunity that we are now free to pursue because all of our former competitors are now too successful to take the kind of risks that we can make right now. So I don't know how any investment in Intel is anything other than symbolic, or in the case of the government, strategic, in the sense of, okay, well, let's have a U.S. landed chip maker in place so that when we continue arm twisting fabrication here, we will have a company that's all set to actually start to make this stuff, and a market for those chips are ready to receive them.
I think the other challenge is that Intel's in a physical business, not an online business. So it's one thing to pivot when you're pivoting from the operating system to the cloud. It's another thing to pivot when you're making chip fabs. All of these things are 5 or 10 years of planning and construction. And so whatever, Intel definitely doesn't have the ability. They are a physical company. They build physical things. And that is an incredibly hard thing to do and make the changes that they're having. I just don't understand, other than the government trying to prop them up and Nvidia trying to prop them up for different reasons. I don't see any upside for Apple to put money into it.
I think there's an upside.
The government making the government happy.
Yeah,
if it became explicit,
Intel will use this money
if there's a quid pro quo from the government to put $100 billion into it or whatever, then it totally makes sense.
I think the scenario is
in this environment.
Come on,
I think the scenario is the U.S. government says a lot of if there are, and I'm sorry everybody, but I'm going to say if there are smart people inside the U.S. government, they might say what we need to do is build a policy that has that makes Intel be able to build chip fab capacity at a level beyond the demand for that current capacity. That's the problem, right? Is Intel's like, we want to build new fabs and advance our technology, but nobody wants to make their processors for them. So if you're the US government, you're like, all right, here's what we have to do. We have to have at least a portion of Intel be capable of this. And maybe it ends up getting spun off, or maybe Intel transforms in some way. But we need to get a whole bunch of titans of the tech industry in on this now, so that this thing ends up becoming viable in 5 years or whatever, because of a tactical reason. And we're putting in our money, and they'll put in some money, and it'll make us happy. That may happen. That's the only scenario that actually makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not, and if you're Apple, yeah, like, look, the other thing I'll say is there are chips. It's what Tim Cook always calls legacy nodes. There are chips that Apple uses in various products that are not on the cutting edge that they could, they're like, all right, we could bake that at Intel. That would be fine.
They don't use their modems anymore, right? I mean,
they don't. No, they bought their modem business. Yeah. Those modems are that are out now in the iPhone Air, for example. That's formerly Intel's modem business that they bought and took away from them, and then spent like 5+ years getting ready to ship.
It's funny is I think Apple would be more prone to just giving money to Intel than buy anything to be nice. Because their bread and butter is so driven by the phone and some of the other things. I think they want to get to a point where they control all of that, and every product that kind of lives in its own world. Again, I think that there, as you said, there's a bunch of politics here. The politics with Europe, politics with other things. If Apple can curry favor to get other things out of the system, then that could make, that's probably the most valid reason for Apple to support Intel, is that there's something else that they could get from the government.
Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this highlight from MacBreak Weekly. If you want to see the whole show, we're every Tuesday. You can watch us live right here on YouTube, or just click the link below and download an episode, or subscribe if you really like it. What is it the kids say? Oh yeah, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.